morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching from, and welcome to my channel. Today, I want us to share from the book of Job, chapter 1. The book of Job comes from the Bible, the Old Testament. It has 42 chapters. The book of Job has 42 chapters. So we'll try and be doing one chapter a day. It won't be consistently every day, but I'll try and complete the story. We'll try and see some of the days we can do 2 chapters a day. So today we're just going to do chapter 1. And I'm going to read as we go so that we do not miss out on some aspects or areas that are very crucial. So the book of Job, chapter 1, is a story of Job. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. His sons used to hold feasts in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite their sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cast God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. So you see, this is Job, a very rich man. God has blessed him. He has 7 sons and 3 daughters. He has property. He owns flock. Is such a rich man, but is a man after God's heart. We see that he feared God and shunned evil, and he would occasionally uh, go and pray for his children, especially after the period of feasting, when the children meet together and feast and drink and eat together. Because normally during these moments of feasting, these are the times that men talk carelessly. We stamp our chests and talk about our achievements. So Job feared that maybe the children have sinned and cast God in their hearts. So Job would regularly arrange for them to be purified. So one day, the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going to and fro on it." So this is NIV version. Sometimes I love using NIV because it is simple, but I would like us to read this Job 1 chapter 6 from King James Version. I have small King James Version with me. Chapter 6 says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came along among them." Now, this is the Old Testament. Then we have the New Testament in the Bible. Before Jesus was crucified and died, Satan still had access to heaven. He would still go to heaven and come back. Satan would still go before God. But after Jesus died, all access was closed on him, and he no longer accesses heaven. So these are the moments that Satan would still go to heaven. And we see when the sons, the King James says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord." The sons of God, these are the representatives of different worlds in the universe, and Earth is one of it. So at that moment, Saturn was representing Earth, and he went to heaven to represent Earth and give uh, give his statement about what is going on Earth. And that is why the Lord said to Saturn, "Where have you come from?" Saturn answered the Lord. The Lord definitely knew Saturn was on Earth. "From roaming in throughout the earth, going to and fro on it." Then the Lord said to Saturn, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Now, God was so proud of Job. God was so proud of Job that he had to mention him to Saturn. And Saturn had something to say, of course. Saturn said, "Does Job fear God for nothing?" Saturn replied, "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The Lord said to Saturn, "Very well, then everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Saturn went out from the presence of the Lord. Wow. This is a man who feared God and shunned evil. And God was so proud of Job. He was a righteous man. But we see God did not cover him up. He allowed Satan to be able to touch him, even though he had already put an hedge around him so that nobody or anything could touch him or harm him. Now we see that he allows Satan to be able to access him. This actually teaches us that righteousness does not exempt us from trials. We will be tried in every way at some point in life. Let us continue. Verse 13. One day, when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the eldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabines attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Now we see Satan in action. And he started off just when the sons and daughters were feasting and drinking. They were making merry and partying. This is when now he sends or he allows the Sabines to attack the servants of Job. When the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, the Sabines attacked and made off with them. So the Sabines attacked them and made off with the donkeys and made off with the oxen and killed the servants. Only this one messenger was allowed to go back and inform Job. This was the first attack. The second attack, chapter 16, while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." Now we see this is the second attack. And it is interesting because we see the messenger coming and say, "It is the fire of God that came," or it is not the Satan who came. No, it is the fire of God fell from heaven, because they had not seen anything like it. It was just so not normal for fire to come down from heaven. So this must be God. And the servant came and said, "The fire of God." You see, Satan is just sitting somewhere watching how Job would react and watching how he accuses now this God who has given you this, he's taking it away, and yet you still pray every day, you still worship him, you still fear him. He is now doing this. Chapter 17, it says, while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who had escaped to tell you. Now, this is another attack, the 3rd attack. We see that another raid was made and all the camels were taken and the servants were killed. Only one servant remained to go and tell Job. Now, the fourth and the biggest attack. Chapter 18. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, we realized when these attacks were happening, it was back to back, back to back. One servant comes in and says this, another one comes in when the other one is still talking. Now the fourth one. While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the eldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who has escaped to tell you. Now, this is the point where Job stood up. We see the first attack, the second, the third. Job was just seated and trying to understand what is going on. But when it touched on his children, when anything touches on your children, that is when your heart stops. But let's see what Job did. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Wow. Wow. At the lowest point of Job, at the lowest point of any parent, who would have thought to say these words about God? Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. It is only wisdom that can enable us to understand that everything we own, including our children, everything that we have in our name belongs to God. We came naked, and naked we shall depart. Even those things that we fight day and night to achieve, we shall all leave them behind. And this is the kind of wisdom and understanding that Job had. And the last chapter of this, the last verse in this chapter says, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. In all this that Satan had planned against him, this was just like phase 1 of the attack. Job stayed true to God. And what we can learn from this chapter is that if we live a righteous life, Satan is limited by God on what he can do to us. Because we see that God give him a go-ahead, and everything he has, he was able to give Satan the powers to do as he pleases. But he says, on the man himself, do not lay a finger. We see that God limited Satan, not his life, but you can touch anything. Then we can also learn from this chapter that Job devotion included his family. Job prayed every day, but also he had a special devotion on his children. He would pray for his children. Maybe he feared that maybe they have cursed God, maybe they have boasted, maybe they've said something that would anger God, and he would still pray for his children. What happens when the blessings are taken away from us? What happens when the blessings are taken away from us? Because most of the times we are enjoying the blessings, the covering of God, the favors of God. But what really happens when the blessings are taken away from us? Do we curse God? Do we now shun away and shut God out of our lives? What happens when this blessing, the very same blessing that God has given us, is taken away from us? Most of the times we ask God, why did you allow this to happen to us? Where were you when this was happening? But we forget that it is indeed God who gives. And if it is taken away from us, still it is the same God who allowed us to live and own whatever we have. And that is what I had for today. We'll continue reading the book of Job. It is a complex book. A friend just suggested that I go through the book of Job. I know it is a challenge, but I know God will supply us with the necessary wisdom and knowledge to understand His word and understand what He wants us to learn from this story. And that is it for today. Bye bye till next time.